Hello, and welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. She's the founder of the Schiller Institute, a respected author and analyst, and she joins us today to provide insights into the global battle to create a new paradigm. It's October 15th, 2025. I'm Harley Schlanger, and I'll be your host. You can email your questions and comments to Helga to questions@schillerinstitute.org or post them on the chat page. Well, Helga, the big story this week is the agreement brokered by Donald Trump for a ceasefire in Gaza, which included a return of Israeli hostages held by Hamas and Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. While it's been hailed by some, including President Trump, as an end to hundreds or even thousands of years of conflict, there's much about the deal which is a matter of controversy, such as can the ceasefire hold? Who will govern Gaza? Will it be rebuilt, etc.? Helga, what is your overall assessment of this deal and how it's working?
Well, I think obviously the first reaction is a tremendous relief that this killing is ending, or at least can end, and for the most part is ending. I think this is to the credit of President Trump, who finally leaned on Netanyahu in the way where he could not say no, and I think it is the first very important step, because what had happened in the last 2 years has just become so unbearable for the conscience of the whole world. It's a whole other story. So there is now the chance to end this. The latest news from today is that through the negotiations of all the parties who were participating in this agreement, there is now a 15-people committee which is supposed to rule Gaza. It's all people from Gaza, all Palestinians, which is one of the conditions of the Palestinians, that no non-Palestinian shall be involved. So that seems to work. And now, naturally, the question of the hostages, the dead hostages, remains. There, I think it is very important, a statement which was made by Gershon Baskin, who was one of the or is one of the key negotiators in the team. The point he made in a statement just today, that the Israeli pressure, and accusations are not well grounded, that Hamas is not delivering these dead bodies right away, because he made the point that many of the Hamas leaders who were involved in knowing where these bodies are buried have been killed themselves, and many of them are under the rubble, that others have been killed, basically without identification, being buried under the rubble. So therefore, that should not be an issue, where it is discussed as a proof that Hamas is not sticking to the agreement. Egyptian intelligence apparently is now helping Hamas to try to locate these dead bodies. So that should not be an obstacle. I think that, everything really depends on now a decisive change for the improvement, not only for Gaza, for the reconstruction, but for the West Bank, for the two-state solution. Unfortunately, reports also today were that the Israelis halved the humanitarian aid going into Gaza. That would be a tragedy, because many people are on the level of starvation. But I think overall, everything now depends on really changing the parameters for good. And I think that the most important thing, what we can do, and you can do as our viewers, help us to put the Oasis plan on the agenda, really in a major way right now. Because if there would be now an agreement by all the neighbors, all the Arab neighbors, all the big neighbors in the larger environment, Russia, China, India, Iran, Egypt is already involved, and all the countries in the region, if all of them would agree that the hundreds years of violence and tension has to be overcome by putting in a perspective of development for all, because the new name for peace is development, then I think there can be a change in the situation. And indeed, I think this region could reconnect to the great tradition it had in the times of the ancient Silk Road, when Southwest Asia was a hub for the connection and trade between Asia, Europe, and Africa. And that is exactly what the Oasis Plan would be the beginning of, by integrating the entire region from India to the Mediterranean, from the Caucasus to the Gulf, as one development area where all the countries involved would benefit by a massive development project, starting with the creation of new fresh water through a system of canals from the Red Sea and the Dead Sea to the Mediterranean, and from there, branching out through artificial rivers, desalinating large amounts of ocean water for irrigation, agriculture, forestry, orchids, industry, new cities. All of that could be developed, and therefore I think you should help us to put that on the agenda. I'm extremely happy that I was able to make an interview yesterday with the Palestinian ambassador to Copenhagen, Hassassian, and he gave in this interview a full endorsement of the Oasis Plan. So please, can we just watch this?
I think this is the right time for your organization to push forward and to market the Oasis Plan, because as I said earlier, and in several occasions, I boosted the Oasis Plan as a prelude towards economic development, towards infrastructural development. I think this is a recipe which is ready for international donors and stakeholders to use in the process of the national reconstruction and the infrastructural development of Gaza. I think this is the time to market the Oasis Plan, to be factored in by those who are going to be involved in the reconstruction of Gaza, as a plan that could help with other plans, merging them together and being a major partner in that developmental process. So the Oasis Plan now is becoming more and more visible to stakeholders, to factor it in any process of development.
Okay, so this is an excerpt of a longer interview with Ambassador Hassassian. This interview will be put on the EIR website. I think we will put it eventually elsewhere, and on the Schiller site and other sites. But please go to the EIR new website, download the interview, and distribute this interview to as many colleagues, friends, forces you can possibly reach. Get it to all the parliaments, get it to all the countries of the region, because I think that the full endorsement of the Oasis Plan by the ambassador from Copenhagen, who was organizing with us for this in several conferences of the Schiller Institute, the International Peace Coalition, that really shows the way how to lead this situation into a new era for the entire region. So that would be my urgent request to you.
Well, while the process was unfolding, there was a meeting at Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt of, I think, 20 or 22 countries that came together to discuss how to make sure that this peace process is fulfilled. And given the fight for the Oasis Plan, do you have any indication that there is support for your late husband's plan, as we just saw from the ambassador to Denmark?
Yes, because I don't have actual news from that meeting as such, but I know that several representatives of several of the countries who were participating in previous occasions had expressed an absolute strong endorsement for it. If you want to know some of the names, go to the webpage of the Schiller Institute and look under endorsements for the Oasis Plan, and you will find a list of some of the people who endorsed it, and among them are quite important people such as the former foreign minister of South Africa, Naledi Pandor, then other ambassadors from Iran like Hossein Mousavian and many others as well. So there has been a discussion that, the best and actually maybe only way how you end this conflict is to lift the entire discussion on a completely new level where you have an economic development plan where everybody participates, so that, I understand from also what Ambassador Hassassian was saying later in the interview, the question of reconciliation between the Israelis and the Palestinians obviously is not so easy. If you think, that a lot of blood has been shed and people are traumatized. There were 2 years of what the UN called genocide. So it's not so easy. But the best environment for it is the idea of peace through development, that everybody can see that there is a better future if they work together. So I think that, your help, don't look at it as a commentator. It's very easy to now have all kinds of comments about Trump's speech in the Knesset. One could say a lot about that, or, what is not yet happening and here and there. But I think we should not take that attitude. We should take an attitude of trying to now move the whole Middle East to a new phase of economic development, benefiting everybody, giving everybody a future. I think that's the only thing to do. So that is my urgent request to you. Take this interview with Ambassador Hassassian and distribute it widely together with our Oasis plan and a list of the endorsers to give people a sense that we are not starting from scratch, but that there is actually already significant support for the idea.
One of the more profound commentaries on the Gaza genocide was a Substack post from Avram Burg, the former Speaker of the Knesset. He wrote of the end of the siege of Gaza is a moment when Israelis must, quote, look in the mirror and recognize what we have become, and it is ugly, unquote. But he said it's now time for a collective soul to undergo a transformation. And he put forward his hope that the Jewish people would recognize that, quote, the beating heart of Judaism was never physical force, but spiritual refinement, unquote. One of our colleagues asked me to ask you, what can be done to produce such a transformation that would then lead toward the idea of reconciliation through economic development?
Well, I think, first of all Israelis should listen to Avram Burg, because, the other points he made in the interview, he said in the history of many nations, such a point has come. For Germany, it was 1945, where, we were at the 0 hour looking at a rubble field of, shattered illusions and crimes. Then the United States after the end of the Vietnam War, and now Israel at this moment. I think the first thing is to really come to the point where people in Germany at the time said, never again. Because I think that cut with the crimes which were committed is the first absolute necessary step. And then, eventually, other than the economic reconstruction, you have to find the better angels of your identity and your soul. And in the case of, Israel and Palestine, there are many great traditions, which have to be activated and evoked, and there has to be a dialogue of these civilizations, like in the case of Israel, it is many poets and many great thinkers like Mendelssohn, for example, and many others who represent that better side. And these people have, or these traditions have to be evoked. That is what I think is necessary in general, because we are looking at a deep cultural crisis in many countries of the, especially of the West. So that approach is urgent elsewhere as well.
One additional urgent matter is the continued threat coming from the Netanyahu regime of a new strike or war against Iran. So from London, we had a question, is there still a danger of a renewed war between Israel and Iran? And the same person asked, why is Iran such a target for British imperial geopolitics?
Well, I mean, I think the danger is clearly still there. As a matter of fact, there are many analysts. Some of them are extremely well versed in the history of the Middle East and have delivered analysis in the past which were accurate, such as Alistair Crook, former British diplomat and analyst with profound knowledge about the region, who thinks that the attack is imminent. I think if that happens or not really depends on President Trump. If he can basically put the weight of the United States down that not happen, it will not happen. Unfortunately, just to say this in parentheses, there are news from today that 3 B-52 bombers have been positioned to attack Venezuela. And, so we are not yet in safe quarters around the world. But I think concerning Iran, I think the factor which would speak against it is that in the meantime, since the US and Israeli attacks on Iran in June, the defense forces of Iran have been strengthened significantly, also through cooperation, I think, with Russia and China. So if there would be a renewed attack, the response by Iran could be pretty devastating for Israel. So it is not exactly sure if forces there would want to take that risk. There are some analysts who even say if that happens, then that will be the end of Israel, because there will be such a countervailing strike coming from Iran. So I really would strongly hope that the United States puts their weight down and says no, because there is now a new era. And I think, whatever you may think about other aspects of the policy of Trump, I think that he did bring this to the present phase. Biden didn't do it, Trump did it. So, let's give him the credit of doubt that he will, basically prevent such an attack from happening. Now, the reason why the Israelis are so fixated on Iran, well, I mean, there's a long history, the so-called resistance front. I mean, if you have war, it is the nature of war that, on both sides, a lot of crimes are happening, or what you could call crimes, a lot of casualties, a lot of bad blood. So I think the fact that Iran has been absolutely resisting any capitulation, and one should always remember that Israel is not necessarily its own actor, but we always looked at it, especially my late husband always would say that Israel is being used as a hand grenade by the oligarchical forces in the Anglosphere, and therefore one should really look there also for the reasons of this opposition. If you have a major country like Iran, which refuses to submit to the unipolar world, and we had Bush, we had all the interventionist wars, so the reasons for that are to be looked in the, I think, much larger geostrategic context.
You're listening to Helga Zepp-LaRouche. This is our weekly webcast and dialogue on the strategic situation coming after the breakthrough in the Middle East. Now, Helga, we've gotten some emails that are plainly joyful about the developments, but we, as you might expect, many that are critical or suspect. Thomas B., who's a regular, said the deal looks to him like a plan to block the Silk Road project and establish a permanent outpost for the Anglo-Americans and their Zionist puppets to control the region. This is referring to the Middle East initiative that was part of the Trump plan initially. What can you say about that?
Well, I mean, that is definitely an aspect of the situation, but I mean, I tend to look at it from the standpoint of the overall arch of development, because, I'm sure that there are people who still think that Riviera Gaza is an option, who still think in terms of real estate investments. But, the overall trend is that we see the emergence of a new economic system whereby the countries of the global south want to overcome the period of colonialism. And, I think President Trump has not really yet understood that, because he kept saying this again, that, the BRICS, that because of his tariffs, all the members of the BRICS are leaving the BRICS. I don't see that at all. I think there's massive pressure sometimes against individual countries, but, I think the counter model does not work. Look at what happened to Milei and Argentina. It's in ruins. I think that there are efforts to, contain the BRICS, but the BRICS represent 85% of the world population, and, the Middle East or Southwest Asia are part of that. So, parts of the Gulf states are part of the BRICS. So I think that one has to watch these developments carefully, but I think the overall trend is in the direction of a new system of governance. I mean, and I really can only say the people in the West should better review what the BRICS are, what the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the CIS, the Eurasian Economic Union, ASEAN, Mercosur, CELAC, the AU, all of these organizations are trying to move to a new system whereby you no longer have the dominance of one country or a block of countries, but rather have a system of governance where you have the emphasis on sovereignty, on equality, on non-interference, on acceptance of the different social system. And that is what the majority of countries are trying to realize. And I think the attacks on the BRICS, I think, people should rather study what is the actual content of the 4 initiatives of President Xi Jinping, for example, the Global Governance Initiative, the Global Security, Development and Civilizational Initiative, who represent, taken all together, a new framework for a peaceful new security and development architecture, which has many similarities with the Peace of Westphalia. And I think that that is the discussion we have to have, because there are only 2 roads to go. One is nuclear war, and the other one is a new system of cooperation and acceptance of each other. So we have to make up our mind of what we want. And I think every sane human being will choose the first.
We have another question from the United Kingdom. This one looking at the situation from an optimistic standpoint. He writes, if Trump could impose his plan on Israel and Hamas, do you think he could do the same working with Putin on Zelensky?
Definitely, because, first of all, the meeting of Putin and Trump in Alaska is not a question of the past. As a matter of fact, every time they are being asked, Peskov and Lavrov and Putin, they make the point that the spirit of Anchorage is still there, and that the US and the Russians are still engaged in a discussion. Now that obviously also has some danger points. If the United States would deliver the Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine, which have 2,500 kilometers range and are nuclear capable. That could represent the red line, which is one too many. There are some technical difficulties. First of all, the US has not unlimited Tomahawk. I think altogether there was an inventory of 4,000 and several hundred have been used already against the Houthis. They take 2 years to build. They cost $2 million per piece. Several of them were made for launch on ships or submarines, and they cannot easily be transferred to land launching. That would require technical changes, which may take up to a year. So it's not so easy. One can be sure that on Friday, when Zelensky will visit Trump in the White House, that will be a big topic. I think this will be a big danger point, but if that somehow can be avoided, or Trump is not agreeing to deploy the Tomahawk to Ukraine, I think he started his whole second term with the announcement that he would bring the Ukraine war to an end. I think he has not given up to that, despite his various statements about the frustration about Putin and so forth. He does once in a while, every 2 days. But I think that he is definitely now hopefully encouraged by his own deeds that he did accomplish this ending of the war in Gaza, and that spirit may carry over. So I can only say, let's all work towards that end, because we have to get out of this danger zone, because we are still in the vicinity of a global catastrophe as long as there is no peace between the nuclear powers. And I think that's what we should all work towards.
I have a question for you from a Lebanese journalist who thanked you for the work you've done on the Oasis plan, and he said he's circulating it among his peers. He said that Trump has now threatened sanctions against Spain if the Spanish government does not move toward his demand of NATO members spending 5% of their GDP on NATO and defense. Spanish Prime Minister Sanchez said his government will not agree to that and will only reach 2% this year. He asks, if Trump is serious about normalization of relations with Russia, why is he still pressuring some governments of NATO to increase military spending, which creates because they're preparing for a war with Russia?
Well, I mean, the overall tendency of some Europeans is a relentless militarization, demonization of Russia. I listened to a program the other day. This was a live transmission of an inquiry of the Bundestag Commission for the German Secret Services. And there, the heads of the 3 secret services, they were saying things which were really unbelievable, belligerent, hawkish, no proof. In a certain sense, I think that, are they making foreign policy? I thought the chancellor has tried in Germany to make foreign policy. Here come these 3 heads of the intelligence services basically defining what Germany should do. I find this not in accordance with the Grundgesetz, and one can only, I could say a lot more about these heads, and if I compare them to previous heads, they really seem to be of a certain kind, which, anyway, this is a whole different topic. I think, the problem is that Trump has always insisted that the Europeans buy these weapons in the United States. And that may be a cause in what he does, because the beneficiaries of this would be the military-industrial complex in the United States. And so, I think that is an area I would look to. I think, I'm very glad that Prime Minister Sanchez is not capitulating. I think the policies of many European countries are not aligned with the coalition of the willing. As a matter of fact, you wouldn't need a coalition of the willing if everybody was willing, because the others are not willing. And Spain and Portugal and Italy, many of the Balkan countries, East European countries, Hungary, Slovakia, now Czechia, they're all not willing. So I can only imagine that the threats against Spain will increase that, because every such threat has a boomerang effect, has a blowback. And while that may not be visible every second immediately afterwards, countries are not stupid. They draw their conditions. And in the same way, like the countries of the global south did not buy the NATO narrative about the origins of the Ukraine war, I think there is a lot of discussion, a lot of realignment. And I think this confrontationist policy sometimes may have effects which are the opposite of what was intended.
Now, you've been very clear in your warnings over time of the downward spiral of the German economy, which is picking up speed, led by a shrinkage of the auto sector and the related machine tool sector. The Schiller Institute is circulating a program for German cooperation with China for cooperation to build infrastructure in Africa. Is there progress to report on this initiative? And is this the kind of thing isn't this what German industry should be looking to?
Absolutely. You who are watching, please download this program. It's still not totally worked out because of, takes a lot of work, but we have a draft already outlining the policy. Get this. Maybe we can post it in the under this webcast, because that is obviously the future. I mean, I said this before, but let me restate it. The German economy is an export-oriented economy. We have almost no raw materials, and the only reason why Germany had a high living standard, actually since the policy of the industrialization by Bismarck, was because we had a high ratio of science and technology, a throughput, increasing the productivity of the economy, and then having export and being an export-oriented nation. Now, the high science and technology injection has suffered greatly because of the foolishness of the green policy, the so-called climate change. But there is now a growing discussion coming from the industry finally saying this is all ludicrous, and it should be abandoned. There are more and more scientists who now have finally the courage to say that the climate change which is taking place is due to the long-term cycles in the constellation of the Milky Way, the developments on the sun, but the man-made part is negligible. So that should first be stated. I think the only way how the German industry can somehow get back into shape is to develop new growing markets, like the realization of the Oasis plan would transform the Middle East into a completely different area with vast economic opportunities. Likewise, if we help the countries of Africa now to industrialize by developing basic infrastructure, roads, airports, ports, highways, fast train systems, waterways, energy production and distribution, communication as a precondition for a real industrialization, then these economies could become the engine of the world economy, given the fact that the largest demographic growth is in Africa. By the year 2050, there will be 2.5 billion people there. That is 1 billion more than now, which means that in the next 25 years, we better build 1 billion new productive jobs in Africa, or the refugee crisis will become much, much, much bigger. If, on the other hand, we are helping the African countries to develop 1 billion new productive jobs, that can become a growth area for, not only Africa, but also for Europe and every other country who wants to help in this industrialization process. So we are making big progress. We are discussing it with many people, and you should definitely stay tuned. It is the only way how we can solve the refugee crisis in a humane way, by basically eliminating the root causes why people are running away from hunger, disease, and war, by having peace through development. It's the same approach. The Africa Plan 2063 and the Oasis Plan are of the same spirit. That was a judgment by Dr. Naledi Pandor when she participated in one of our conferences, and I fully agree with that. And that is the only way we will get out of this crisis.
I assume that what you've been discussing will be at the center of this week's International Peace Coalition conference call on Friday. I just want to present one example of the state of delusion that still exists in some US neocon circles. Antony Blinken, the former US Secretary of State, claims that the success of Trump's plan was due to the diplomacy undertaken by the Biden administration. I'm not sure if there's anyone besides Blinken, maybe Biden, believes that. But given the commitment to reality that the IPC represents, what do you expect for this week's discussion?
Well, I'm pretty sure that we will have several representatives from the Middle East, from the Palestinian side, from the Israeli side. Maybe, I have not yet heard the latest, but, if you could have somebody like Gershon Baskin, who was a negotiator. We had Avram Berg, who was also in the middle of things. This is the best forum where you can hear the updates. So make sure that the IPC is growing, because the more people are oriented towards the solutions, that is, the peace movement has to be for peace, but to be against war is not enough. You have to discuss and implement solutions which eliminate the causes for the war. And, our whole trademark has been and is the idea of peaceful development. And that will be the topic for sure on this coming Friday. So make sure you join and get as many people of your colleagues and friends to come there as well.
That's Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So Helga, thanks for joining us and shedding some light on these questions. And we look forward to talking with you again next week.
And please distribute the interview with Ambassador Hassassian.